Thank you everyone for joining. My name is Kevin Jones. I am a developer relations engineer working at Edge and Node, working on the Graph protocol, filling in for Marcus today. Marcus is out, and we're just going to be having Nico on from Tenderize, which is really exciting. And I think just briefly, I want to just cover a couple things real quick. There's a lot of events happening in the ecosystem right now. The first thing I want to talk about briefly is there is the Hack and Heights hackathon that's going on. And the Graph and Pinax are both involved in that. So there are bounties available for that hackathon. And I'll paste these links in the chat for you guys so you guys can check it out. But it is an online hackathon, starts on the 21st and goes through the 27th. If you happen to be in Berlin for Berlin Blockchain Week, we are doing a kickoff event, which is going to be in Berlin on the 21st in the evening between, I believe, 6 and 10. That should be a lot of fun. Also, in the morning of the 21st, there's the Biddle Base Camp, which I'm helping organize, which is going to be a workshop all focused around building dApps on Base. And there will be a workshop about indexing smart contract data on Base. That should be interesting as well. And we also have, if you're at Consensus this next week on the 30th, there is a cocktail reception. Also, we will put this into the chat, but it is going to be at Hotel Zaza. So this should be interesting if you're in the area. And then the last one is I'll also be in Belgrade for Belgrade Blockchain Week. And the Graph is doing an all-day zero to dApp event where you can basically learn how to build a dApp from zero to nothing. And we're going to be having talks by myself on Scaffold ETH and the Graph, as well as talks from Tenderly, Chainlink, Safe, and yeah, that's it. So should be a lot of fun. So if you happen to be in Belgrade, that would be really cool too. Check that out. Okay, so without further ado, I think we can, let me just go ahead and stop sharing my screen. Cool. So yeah, I'd like to welcome on Nico from Tenderize. Nico is the founder of Tenderize, and he's going to be talking about some interesting stuff. And after Nico's done, we're also going to have Paka from Edge and Node talk about some topics as well. And yeah, so without further ado, Nico, please feel free to take it away.
Thanks a lot, and thanks for the introduction. So yeah, my name is Nico, founder and CTO at Tenderize, but also been building with Graph Protocol for a very long time. So quick TLDR on Tenderize. For those who don't know, we built liquid staking for the Graph, so you can liquid stake to any indexer that you like and have your stake liquid. You can instantly swap it back for a GRT. And any indexer on the network can basically have its own LST. So we basically extend the Graph network with almost enshrined liquid staking. And for that, we have a replication, and that uses a lot of data, and that is mostly powered by the Graph, and that's what we'll talk about today. Quick background on myself as a builder with the Graph. So I've been, before Tenderize, I was an engineer at LivePeer, which was one of the first protocols to launch its subgraph on the Graph. And before that, I was building dApps in Web3 since 2017, 2018. And before Graph Protocol, it was really a pain to have data-rich apps. I remember using things like local storage and listening for Ethereum events to then update local storage. And while doing that at my Web 2.5 job back in the day, I remember hearing about the Graph for the first time and refreshing the homepage every day until it launched and I could use it basically. So that's a quick background on me as a builder with the Graph. So yeah, first of all, things we'll talk about today, the Tenderize subgraphs, where you can find them, how we use them, and then we'll also show some basic queries you can do with our subgraphs. They're fully open source, by the way, so any of the schemas you can find in the GitHub repo, which we'll get into. And then I'll also show a quick example how you could build a simple dashboard yourself with this subgraph, or even potentially other subgraphs, using the first tool I basically came across on Google that allows you to visualize GraphQL data. So you can find our subgraphs in the Explorer. They're deployed on the decentralized network. If you just search for Tenderize v2, you'll find both our subgraphs. One is deployed on mainnet, and one is deployed on Arbitrum. Well, they're both deployed on the Arbitrum network for the graph, but they're indexing contracts on mainnet and Arbitrum from Tenderize respectively. And we use both of these in our application. You can find these on GitHub at github.com/tenderize/tendergraph. So yeah, there's also a small client in there built on the Graph Client SDK, which you can use. It has some pre-built queries, so you can basically just grab the SDK and run those queries in your JavaScript or TypeScript applications. If you haven't heard of the Graph Client SDK, I suggest you check it out. It's a really cool tool to easily build SDKs for any subgraph. So how do we use subgraphs in the graph, and like why is it so powerful for us? So basically all of the data, as I mentioned, that's shown in the Tenderize application, whether that's, all of the different indexers on the network, how much stake they have through Tenderize, their API, any other stats, that's all powered by subgraph queries. But also, as I mentioned, every indexer has its own LST. And with, over 100 indexers, you have a lot of different ERC20 tokens. And one thing our subgraph does is also track the balances for all of these different tokens. And that's something that using the subgraph for is very useful for us, because otherwise we'd be having to make queries against the blockchain directly for all of this stuff, which would be a lot of requests to something like Infura or Alchemy or our own Ethereum nodes. But with the graph, it's really just a single query, and that makes it so powerful for us. The way we use the subgraph, let me just make this a little, wrong button. Make this a little bigger. We don't have users when they go to the application. They don't query the subgraph directly from their machine. There's a couple of reasons for that. Some of the data that we show is basically shown to everyone. You can imagine that all of the index are shown in the application. Here in this list, that's something that everyone sees. So it doesn't really make sense to have everyone query this on his own machine. So instead, we use a Next.js, basically Edge API, which we use as a caching layer. And when somebody comes to the Tenderize app, we basically check, we request the data from our API. We check, is the data cached there? If yes, we just return the cached data. If not, we fetch the data from our subgraphs, we cache the data, and then we return the data to the application. This also kind of prevents us from running up a very high query bill and exposing up our API keys to the public through our application as well. So just in terms of security, it's also just for us a good idea. I know this doesn't make our application entirely like a decentralized application, let's say, because it's not hostable on something like IPFS, but it does make it quite powerful to serve data very quickly and still use subgraphs to power everything underneath. So since this was supposed to be a little bit of a workshop, I had some ideas planned for making some basic queries, but also building, like I mentioned, a small dashboard. So as mentioned, you can find our subgraphs in the Explorer, or you can go to Subgraph Studio, and you can find a playground there where you can, you're probably familiar with this, but play around with the subgraph, but you'll also find the documentation or the schema there, where you can really get a good intuition on the things you can query and also how to query them. The most basic things in Tenderize is these three entities. So one is asset, and assets, which is basically the tokens we support. We support 3 tokens at the moment, which is GRT, LPT, and Matic. And for each of these assets, you can have multiple tenderizers. And a tenderizer is a vault, a liquid staking vault, that is tied for the graph to an indexer, for example. So if we then check the different assets that we have, and this is going to be on the Arbitrum subgraph, so it's only going to show, I'll make this a little big. So if it will only show GRT and LPT, but we can query the assets that we have and their TVL, for example, and then you'll see that we'll have, this one is live peer, and this one is the graph. This is the token address for GRT on Arbitrum, and then you'll also see the corresponding TVL. So I'll just grab this ID for GRT here, and then we can query the deeper data for GRT. So we can specify the assets and then the ID for GRT. And then we can show things like TVL, but also how many tenderizers there are. So at the moment, there's 32 tenderizers. So that means that 32 indexers on the graph have a liquid staking vault on Tenderize. But we can also query time series, which is very useful for building graphs and line charts. And this is on a granular day basis at the moment. And you can query for the asset things like TVL. You can query the date. I think TVL is, or you can also query the rewards. And that's a basic query that you can use to get some quick time series data on the growth of how much totally GRT is staked in Tenderize, for example. Some other things you can do if you want to learn more, for example, about a specific Tenderize vault or tenderizer that's in the application for an indexer here. Let's say we want to learn more about, who should we pick? Let's say Stake Squid. Oh, no, that one doesn't have GRT in it. Let's say Protofire. Let's not make it too complicated. We can find the address for the tenderizer for Protofire in the application. So I'm just going to quickly grab that. And another query we can then make is to query data for a tenderizer, and the ID is going to be the address, the contract address that I just copied. And then we can query things like also the TVL. We can also query, other things like the time series for a particular tenderizer, where you can also query the TVL. You can query the shares of the vaults, the total shares of the vaults, and really get more general data about a particular tenderizer that way. how exactly, we also use subgraphs to calculate the API that is shown in the application. It's a little bit more complicated to do things like that because it depends on some calculations we do after fetching the data. If you're interested in that, it is fully open source in the subgraph repo. That was in the presentation, so it's on our GitHub. Now, how could you build some basic dashboards out of this? This tool is called Retool, not to advertise it. It's the first time I've used it. It's just a throwaway account, but it's a way to visualize GraphQL data easily. I'll zoom this in a little bit, and we'll use one of the queries we've... Oh, I can't zoom this in. Okay. I will use one of the queries we've just used, which is basically going to show the cumulative TVL for GRT over time. I've already built the one for LPT to kind of try it out. But you'll see a lot of things that are very familiar. We've picked GraphQL as our data source because that's what we'll be using. And then we have simply a link to our subgraph. This is the development link, so please don't shoot me. It's not a paid query. But yeah, this is from my Subgraph Studio. I pasted this in. And then we have a query that we just had before, where we query the time series for an asset. We have the date and we have the TVL. We manipulate the output data a little bit to convert the timestamp into an actual date. And then we can see an example response below here, which is, just going to be what is returned from the subgraph. And then we have built a graph out of that. So we can replicate that for GRT to show how much GRT in total is staked. Sorry, forgive me. It's the first time that I've used this thing. Where do I create a query again? Maybe I've used up my only one free query. That's also a possibility. Okay. Okay, the plus here. Give me for a second. Okay, here we go. This should work fine. I'm just wondering. Okay, let me copy the URL from here, and then we can get started on this query. I'll just give it a quick data source. And then we can write a query. I'll just modify this one instead to be for the graph. So we'll first start with the playground to write our query, and then we can just copy paste it. So we're going to want to grab the TVL time series for the graph. So we will first want to grab the ID for the asset, which is going to be the token address for GRT. I'm just going to grab it through the subgraph. I know by heart it's the second one, but you can always also grab it through Etherscan. And then to grab the time series. We can do asset days. That's the name of the entity. Where the asset, so that's going to be the ID of the asset, is going to be the graph's address. And then we can get the date and the TVL. And if we try that query out, we see we get a result, and we get several instances of a date with a TVL, and we can see that it changes over time, so that's all good. So we can copy this query, paste it into our visualization tool, and then we can save and run it, and we can check the data that's returned here. And we can also see, like, let me change the title of this, if I can still do that somehow. Oh, yeah. So this is now for the graph. And we can see that there's currently about 27 million GRT taken tenderized through the graph. So yeah, this is how you can use queries like the time series queries here to build charts or dashboards or anything like that, or even include tenderized data into your own application. So yeah, thanks a lot, everyone, for checking this out. Like I mentioned, the repository is open source on GitHub. Feel free to check it out. And if you have any questions about building on our subgraphs, feel free to come over to our Discord and shoot us a message. We're super eager if people want to build dashboards using our subgraphs, because it's something we don't really have at the moment to visualize some of the data in the Tenderize protocol. So yeah, feel free to reach out to us. And if you're not yet staking your GRT through Tenderize, feel free to do so, and yeah, have it be fully liquid. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nico. That was a really cool presentation. Yeah, really cool to see like the power of your guys' subgraphs, and you guys have the aggregations, which is really cool. All right, cool. Does anyone have any questions for Nico? You can either ask in the chat, or feel free to come off mute if you have rights. Cool. And it looks like someone posted the, maybe you could post the repo link too in the chat. That would be good, just so that it's in there. One of the questions from Lewis, is there any plans to upgrade to substreams powered subgraphs? So I don't know if you've been following, but there is the substreams powered subgraphs, so you can get some more like additional data. I'm not sure if you guys are doing like ETH calls to get the balances at the moment, but the benefit with like the substreams is you can get a little bit more access to the data from substreams.
We're not at the moment. It's something we're definitely looking into to adopt. We're still building subgraphs, like I would say 2021, 2020. But yeah, substreams would be very useful for us. We, especially now that we have added our TenderSwap product to our subgraphs as well, where we do make calls to fetch USD prices from Uniswap. It would be useful to, for example, be able to use substreams for that instead of straight up calls, for example.
Cool. Yeah, we also just added substreams trigger support, which is very interesting, where you can do like trigger mappings and basically run assembling script against the substreams, which is really useful as well. Might be something worth checking out. Any plans to check out the aggregations and timestamps type? So I don't know if you saw, we also added that ability to do like built-in timestamps and aggregations with native configuration.
No, I haven't seen that. So if you have a link to that, that would be super useful. If somebody has also had experience with building a multi-chain resolver using the Graph client SDK, feel free to ping me because it's something that hasn't been really working for us at the moment, but it's something we'd love to use. So we can have like one unified SDK for our subgraphs on any chain.
Awesome. Lewis also has an app-related question, less relevant. What to do with hats afterwards? Any plans to do something else than Wagyu tokens?
Sure. Yeah, so the hats will just be when you've converted them to Wagyu or governance token. When that's live, the hats will be gone and burned, and you'll be able to stake our governance token to participate in governance, of course. We're checking out some cool things we can do with tender swap and fee gauges and bribes there. So yeah, make sure to keep an eye on that. But yeah, hats is just the pre-launch thing instead of the governance token.
Awesome, cool. What chains are you looking to expand to? Anything particular or anything you wanted to bring up?
The two biggest products that we have planned for this summer and Q3 is we're gonna build a liquidity pool for existing Ethereum LSDs and LRTs in the same principle as TenderSwap. And we're also gonna deploy TenderSwap on Solana, where you can for any type of staked SOL, LSDs or natively staked SOL, instantly unstake it through TenderSwap. And in Q3, we'll be working on our borrowing product, where you can borrow any of our TGRTs, for example, for any indexer against GRT, and do cool strategies with that.
Cool. That sounds interesting. All right. Well, thank you so much, Nico. Again, really awesome to have you on, and appreciate your time today. So everyone give a round of applause to Nico. Next, we're going to have Paka come on from Edge Node team. And I believe, Paka, you wanted to share your screen as well.
And so this is where you have a per-chain configuration file, and then you're able to use Mustang templating to then prepare a graph manifest deploy. And notice that it's still kind of manual on a per-chain level, but it's better than nothing. And so we go to the next slide. Kind of the next iteration of this, the newer generation of deploying across chains, was using the networks.json method. And so this is where you have a single networks.json file with all your chain info, and then you use our prepared yarn build commands, then yarn deploy, and it magically builds your subgraphs.yaml file according to which chain you're building. All tonight, but these two strategies are kind of limited because sometimes on a per chain basis you need overrides, like differences in handlers and stuff, and this really doesn't allow that. And so this is where the kind of more complicated version of mostly the same but not identical subgraphs on each chain emerges. And so there's a couple of strategies here that I've seen in the wild, mainly on GitHub and competitors, in terms of managing cross-chain data indexing. Strategy that's most kind of graph ecosystem native is this one subgraph per chain, or an artifact that I call it too more generally, and then an optional management layer. And like Nico mentioned, there's Graph Client, which sounds like he's running into issues, but we should talk about that too. But there's management layer solutions out there in our ecosystem and more broadly that are kind of designed to help overcome some of the hurdles with querying and also deploying graphs. So Graph Client is really focused more on the query side. Mistari Subgraphs TLI is predominantly on the deploy side. Gold Sky Mirror is kind of on the query side as well. They take pre-existing subgraph entities and then let you configure them via YAML and kind of query it that way magically. The alternative strategy that I've seen on the market, which is not as common, but it's enticing for sure, is the one artifact for all chains. So this is where you have maybe a single artifact. It could be a subgraph. It could be called something else if it's at a different company. But there's a schema, mappings, manifest, the manifest is all chain. And so you don't have necessarily per chain artifact and the overhead of creating and managing all of those. In this example, we have a fictitious foo protocol with 5 subgraph artifacts. But you can imagine some teams might have 200, or not 200, maybe, I guess we're getting there, 20, 50, 100 subgraphs. And so depending on how many chains you're on or how many projects you're managing. And so there's some problems if you're not providing guardrails and nice streamlined management layer tooling or a different experience that competitors like Ponder provided. And so could we toggle? Yeah. This is some feedback I got from Masari's subgraph dev. He's a bit suspicious or skeptical about putting multiple networks into a single artifact. I heard very different opinions from others. And so part of why I really wanted to come today was to hear from you all what you think. And kind of before we jump into that question, would we actually toggle to the next? And so this is where I'm kind of doing a hypothetical mind map of who I think would actually go for this kind of single artifact solution, and kind of map that to switching costs, really. And so I think that existing teams that are using a lot of pre-existing subgraphs might be wary of switching to a whole new solution. But it kind of depends on what scale of work they're at. A team like Masari or Graph Builders DAO, or even a large DEX versus a new team that's just starting at a hackathon. They might be really excited about a single artifact solution because it works perfectly for them. They're not carrying legacy artifacts. And so I'm really curious to hear from the builders in the room, maybe where you fall along this kind of hypothetical like spectrum of builders and your interest in kind of a cross-chain solution. Can we pivot back to the previous slide, Kevin? Yeah, just kind of feedback or comments from the crowd. Really curious what you all think in terms of managing this cross-chain. Feel free to unmute as well.
I was going to say we might have people just being able to type in chat. They might not have speaker rights or something. But yeah, please give some feedback if you have it. If you want to come off mute, if you can talk, feel free to come off.
Yeah, and then if you're a little camera shy, don't hesitate to just reach out to me, send me a DM or chat. I would love to hear your feedback. But could we go for it, Nico?
Yeah, I'll speak out a little bit on this because this is something, we've obviously ran into. Our subgraphs are identical schemas across chains. We don't really run into any complexities regarding differences in handlers or anything regarding that. But yeah, of course, one thing to note is that these are all EVM-based chains, and like I mentioned, all the same schema. So I imagine this would be only one use case. But even for that use case, I feel like what we really want is a single endpoint to query. I haven't really considered managing subgraphs across chains to be that big of a pain. It sometimes does feel like the flexibility to make little changes between deployments on different chains is very useful. And aggregation on the client side, for example, using Graph Client and resolvers, could be a good intermediary step for that. At least for us, it's something that could work. We just haven't been able to get it to work fully yet. But for us, that's a really good middle ground already.
Very cool. That's super valuable feedback. I'll definitely follow up to kind of dive into, or at least, I guess, I don't know how much time we have left. But we'd love to hear kind of the friction points you're running into with Graph Client. But I just have one more slide, and it's really just next steps. If you toggle to the right, Kevin, Mithari had some cool deployment tooling that they've built out, but it's really specialized their repos. But thinking about how we could maybe generalize some of their learnings into some tooling to help with deploying across multiple chains. And then definitely gonna reach out to you, Nico, for all up. What's the problem that you're running into with Wyatt?
Oh, we basically were able to write a cross-chain resolver, but then when we tried to build the client and use it in our application, it didn't actually resolve cross-chain and just the default one. That was the main thing. I think it actually worked in development mode, if I remember correctly, but not when we actually built it as a package that we could use in our app.
Okay. Did you open an issue or anything with the team, or?
No, I briefly talked about it on Telegram with someone, but we, since we rarely use a page where we actually need to query data from multiple chains together at the moment, we've just split it into an SDK per chain, basically.
Okay.
But it's a little annoying to manage at times, so being able to have a working resolver would be awesome.
Cool. Does anyone else have any more questions for Baka about this topic or any input? Cool. How can people reach both of you guys if they want to reach you? Is Discord best, or Twitter, or what do you guys recommend?
Discord, probably. That's for me. Usually most response there.
If anyone has any questions for Nico or for Baka, please feel free to drop them in chat here since they're still around. Otherwise, just feel free to reach out to them. Hope this was a useful session. I thought it was really good. Got lots of really cool details about Tenderize and learned a little bit about maybe the future of how we might handle packages or larger subgraph deployments. So that's really cool, Pocket. Thank you. And yeah, if you guys have any topics you want to see, please don't hesitate to reach out to us and let us know. We're more than happy to listen to you guys and have some interesting topics in the future. So if anyone has any ideas for future upcoming episodes, please let me know. But otherwise, you guys have a great rest of your week and a good weekend. And I'll catch you guys next time. All right. And we'll be around here if you guys have any questions too. So we'll hang out for the next 20 minutes. So cool. Thank you, guys.